All right, hey, welcome to this lesson. It's lesson 18 from MSL202 in the Blackboard ROTC curriculum. This lesson is called Terrain Model and Sand Table Rehearsals. This is really going to focus on your terrain model and sand table, but we're going to talk about rehearsals as a whole, why they're important, and how you can implement them into your own training. My name is Captain Silver Beatty. I'm an APMS at the University of Montana, and I'm going to be leading you through this lesson. So to start off, I want you to think back. Have you ever had to do something, but you didn't know how to do it or where to even go? And this can be something big, it can be something recent, maybe something a long time ago that really sticks out in your memory, but just something that you had to do, but you didn't know how or where to even start. What was the outcome? What did you do? Did you seek more guidance? Did you just wing it and hope for the best? What was your outcome of this situation? Now, think back from a different perspective about maybe an experience that you've had in a sport or a club, or even just here in ROTC, where you just wish someone had explained what you were supposed to do before you had to do it. And let's be honest, we've all been in that position, but I want you to think about that one experience that stands out in your mind. How did that feel? How did it feel to be in a moment where you just wanted somebody to tell you what to do before you had to do it? When I think about this, I think about the first time at PRT way back in my cadet days, probably not long after many of you were born. I showed up to PT and I didn't know what I was supposed to do, but I was expected to be in the formation and follow the cadence and the instructions and the commands. And I wish somebody had taken me aside before I stepped into that PT session for the first time and walked me through it, because how I felt was completely out of place. I felt like I didn't know what I was doing. I hadn't had any practice or rehearsals, if you will, to not look like the sore thumb out there that didn't know what was going on. I don't know if even any of you can relate. I'm pretty sure we all can though, right? All right, so that leads us right into what we're going to learn about today. First, we're going to talk about how a rehearsal impacts our mission execution, why it's important, and what negative or positive impacts it can have on us. And then the next learning objective is to prepare and conduct a terrain board rehearsal. Now, that's not something you're going to do while you're watching this video. It's something that I'm going to encourage you to go out and do, or at least grab a pen and paper and practice conducting or preparing, if you will, a terrain model of some sort. And we'll talk about what that looks like in just a moment. Now, before we get into that, I want you to think about this. What do you think platoons or squads or even teams use rehearsals for? What's the point? What's the purpose of a rehearsal? Now, if you said to help understand their roles in upcoming operations, practice complicated tasks, and ensure equipment and weapons function properly, you've already read ahead. Sounds like you might have read that read ahead like you're supposed to. Good on you. But if you just simply said it's to get some practice in, you're also right. So the by the book definition is to help understand our roles in what's coming forward, right? And that's pretty common sense. Think about if any of you have ever been in choir, or you've been in band, or you've been in some sort of acting field, right? Do you just get your lines and then the next weekend go out and do the recital or the play? No, you have to do rehearsals leading up to that, right? So it's understanding your own role in that upcoming operation or task. Then it's to practice some of the more complicated tasks. So some of those like tasks that one require multiple moving pieces, like many of our missions do in ROTC, maybe putting somebody that's new into a position, giving them some practice with how they fit into that element. And then we also use them to ensure that our equipment and our weapons function properly. So if you think of like a claymore, for instance, if you haven't seen one and you don't understand how to test it, that would actually be a rehearsal, because we do our demo test, we make sure that we understand how it works and that it's going to function properly. Because if we're on an ambush lane and our intent is to use a claymore for our kill zone and it's not working, then we have to go with plan B, right? but let's make sure, or at least do our best to ensure that our equipment and our weapons function properly before we go out. So that's the all-encompassing reason for why we use rehearsals. It's to practice, to understand, and to get a good feel for how this is going to look in quote unquote real life or in the real mission, but we'll get some practice in so it comes a little more naturally and we can work on some issues. If you've been through the TLP class, you understand that this is also the time to get feedback and find problems with our plan. Rehearsals are really good for figuring out, oh, that's not going to work. This isn't going to work, and then be able to mitigate those issues before you even step out. All right, now think about this. How do you think this class is going to apply to you as a student and a cadet at your own university? Why does learning about rehearsals even matter to you, especially if you're watching this as an MS2? Or maybe even as an MS1. Why do rehearsals matter to you? Well, think about it as a way to prepare yourself, to organize yourself, to coordinate things, assign roles, and even deconflict complex activities across multiple people. So we call that delegation, and then also deconflicting if there's multiple people trying to do the same role. We'll separate that out. We'll make sure that our rehearsals have certain people assigned to certain tasks. Now, if you take this as a student, right? The honest answer is, as much as we all love it, you are likely going to be on a group project at some point. So you can take what you're about to learn and figure out how you can prepare your team, organize the material, organize your tasks, coordinate with each other, assign who's going to do what part of that group project, and then hope that they actually do their part, and deconflict your schedules, or deconflict if this person and this person are doing close to the same thing, making sure that those complex portions of your project are better spread across everybody. So believe it or not, these rehearsals and the way that we conduct rehearsals actually does work into stuff that you do as a student. Now let's get into our methods of rehearsal. This here looks like a fairly complicated, there's a lot of moving pieces to this chart right here, right? These are our types of rehearsals. If you look to the left, that's your minimum time used on the bottom, minimum resources, and minimal risk. And then as that moves up to the top on that axis, you've got the maximum time used, maximum resources, maximum risk. If you look along the bottom there, that's your leader participation, whether it's minimum participation or maximum. And all of these rehearsal types, the 7 that are there on your screen, are going to move along that axis there, where they're going to start with the minimum time, minimum leaders, and move all the way up to it's going to take the most time, resources, and most or all leaders are going to be participating in this, right? So what type of rehearsal do you most often see in ROTC? Between network, map, sketch map, a digital terrain model, a physical terrain model, key leader rehearsal, or full dress rehearsal? I'm going to guess that your answer is likely the terrain model. Granted, we do see key leader and full dress rehearsals, especially if you're involved in things like commissioning, color guards, different things where you do have to do full dress rehearsals. But for the most part, we do terrain models when we're talking about lab, FTXs, sticks lanes, things like that. So how effective do you think this method is? How effective is an actual terrain model? And if you don't know what a terrain model is, like at its core, the terrain model is just a physical replica of the area that you're going to be working in. That's the basic way to break that down. So I know you've probably seen this at lab if you've been to one. You've probably seen it at FTX if you've attended one. But the terrain model is kind of that 3D version of your environment. So typically it tries to replicate on a very small scale the environment that you'll be moving through and doing your actions on. So the effectiveness of this is usually pretty high. You don't need everybody involved. You can use it to help people visualize where they're going, how they're getting there, what route they're taking, what the different emplacements are as far as maybe your ORPs or your objective rally point, your helicopter landing zones, your casualty collection points, and then it'll also show your objective, right? And we're not going to talk too much about micro and macro models. That's a whole different subject, probably likely for your MS3 year, but it is important to know about later on. Right now, I just want you to know that the terrain model is just a 3D replica of your environment that you'll be working in. Now, do know that the terrain model is the most popular rehearsal method. Why? Because it takes less time and fewer resources, but it has enough leader participation to get likely the entire, if not all of the, or the majority of the element, understanding what's going on by just looking at a model. And that's exactly what the name is. It's a model of the terrain, right? So it does take more time and resources than, say, a map, but it's built up. You can use it. You can move your pieces through and almost play kind of this game. I don't know if when any of you were little where you built racetracks in your bedroom or you built buildings or you played with Legos. Think about it in that aspect, that it's not a lot of resources and time because it's a small area, but you can conduct kind of a talk through rehearsal through that terrain model. All right, so speaking of terrain boards and sand tables, these pictures here show some pretty decent replicas of what these are. Now, the difference between a terrain model or terrain board and a sand table is just literally the names, right? So both are going to show what your terrain is. A sand table, from what I understand, they're interchangeable for the most part. But if you look on that bottom left picture, that's more of a terrain model. If you look at that top right picture, you can see that that's built into a sandbox. Maybe your university has an actual pre-built smaller scale sandbox that you can use, you know, G.I. Joes, G.I. Janes, all kinds of different fake cars, play cars, fake trees, just stuff to build your environment in. But a sand table is literally just that. When you think about when we were little kids and we played in sandboxes, it's taking sandboxes to the adult level and using it for your mission. So that's the difference between a terrain board and a sand table. Which answers that question. What does it allow you to do? So the sand table, I think, is pretty common sense, right? It allows you to replicate the area and have people be able to visualize on a smaller scale what they're going to be moving through, what type of terrain they'll be moving through, if they'll be scaling hills, if they'll be moving across a ridge, down through valleys, over saddles. They can actually see what their terrain looks like. These also allow you to, take your pointer or have somebody move your different pieces through and show the movements as you're going in phases. So all the way from stepping off, or hey, here we are in the assembly area or the alpha alpha, we'll be moving in this distance, this direction towards our, let's say, objective rally point. Our actual objective is located here. I'll be taking my leader's recon from here to here. Hopefully the inflection of my voice is helping you visualize what this would look like on a sand table. But that's really what it allows you to do. It allows you to explain the mission by helping people visualize and using their eyes to learn, not just their ears. And we kind of talked a little bit about the differences shown. As you can see, those top ones, that's a very in-depth, typically some sort of a CTC or large scale operation where it's very in-depth, very intricate, very detailed. And you look there right underneath it and you see a smaller scale made with stuff from that exact environment. It looks like that person is even using a twig as their pointer. They've grabbed some rocks to make their trail and or a river maybe. It's very basic. What I like to tell my cadets is it does not have to look like the stuff on the top. It can look as basic as those first two pictures on the left and the bottom, that left one and that middle one. Keep it simple. Don't spend too much time building some impeccable, amazing, perfectly scaled sand table. The point of your sand table is to be able to walk through your execution paragraph from the op board and help your people understand where they're moving. As long as they can visualize the area and visualize their movement through that area, you're golden. You don't need a very intricate terrain model. I know some of you have awesome terrain model kits. I was one of those ones that really liked to have a very pretty intricate terrain model kit that I used. And over time, I realized I used fewer and fewer pieces of that because I just needed to quickly get through, create it, be able to explain the area. Okay, I can't hit that part enough home. that you don't want to waste your precious time of your TLPs building some immaculate terrain model. Okay, they can be very simple. Now, impacting the rehearsal. This can be asked or thought about from two different perspectives. Like I was just talking about, if you're putting so much time and effort into this terrain model that you're losing time to do walkthrough rehearsals, that's going to be a negative impact, right? If you make it nice and basic and it allows you to be able to show the different movements, it's going to make your rehearsals a little bit easier. It's kind of that next step up into your key leader rehearsal or even a full dress rehearsal. It does make that simpler than just jumping from, here's a map, now let's rehearse. One quick note that's not on this slide that I want you to write down or think about, keep in your brain always. When you are in MS3 and beyond into your real Army career, if you're utilizing a terrain model or a sand table, always orient people to your model. Build your model so that the north-facing arrow down there on the ground is actually facing north. That way, when people are walking through it with their eyes, they can visualize themselves walking in that direction. There's going to be different ways that your instructors might be asking you to orient people. There are different types of terms. There's different ways that you can introduce that. But keep that in the back of your mind and maybe take note of it in future labs. If you're in a lab or you're watching these lanes, take note and see if that MS3 or that squad leader, or that platoon leader, platoon sergeant, see if they orient the group to their sand table. Just take note of that. All right, now there are some factors that I want you to consider. We've talked about a few of them. We know that sand tables allow us to basically take a 2D map and make a 3D replica of that. We know that they allow everyone involved just a better understanding of the environment and the operation as a whole. You've got to consider the time available to create it. You only have, your 1/3, 2/3 rule. You only have so much time to create this terrain model. If you have a very artistic and creative mindset, you're going to have to kind of shove that down a little bit and make it as basic and as really, if you think about it, make sure that your most junior MS1 can understand it and you'll be fine. Don't create it to try to make your lane walker or your cadre or your cool MS4 be able to understand it. You will be more successful just making sure your MS1 or most junior soldier can understand what you're trying to replicate. That goes the same thing with the detail. Keep it simple. Another thing you can consider, if time allows, likely not a lot of scenarios in ROTC would allow this, but in future operations, can you make it big enough to walk on? Can you make it to where you can walk through? If you look back at that last slide there, you saw that big giant one where there were probably 20, 30 people lined up on the side of it. That was a large enough one to be able to walk on. There are benefits to that because you can physically do what we call rock drills and walk through each piece of it. One step is good for 50 meters or is scaled down to 25, 50 meters. So you can actually walk the route that you're going to be on. This isn't something that I would necessarily expect to see in ROTC, but it's something to think about for future. So, last question, then we'll wrap up. How can you use this class outside of ROTC? We already talked about how to implement this in group projects, but there are other ways too. And I just want you to take that. I won't give you the answers there because there are 1,000, and I know you just want to be able to click out of this and say that you watched this class. But I want you to think about how you could actually use this outside of ROTC, just as a student or an athlete or a worker at a job that you've got. So in closing, we illustrated how a rehearsal impacts mission execution. We kind of talked through what the different rehearsals were. We talked about the preparation and the actual conducting of a terrain board rehearsal. Going forward, if you have the time, maybe find an MS3 or an MS4 if you have the opportunity. Work with your classmates, talk with your ROTC instructor, and start practicing these. It can be a lot of fun. I know for my classes, I have them use our big sand table in the back of our classroom, and they've done everything from putting together a terrain model for a volunteer service project to working through their actual next lab sticks lane that they're going to be going through. get some stuff. If you're a Lego person, even if you like building, if you're a graphic designer, you like building stuff on slides, practice building a terrain model. And then the next step would be practice building your terrain model kit. I'm sure there's a million different types out there. I know ROTC, specifically USAC, has some that you can download and cut out. These are good to have on hand. They're good to learn what the different pieces are. They're good to learn what you'll actually use and what works best for you and your element. But getting terrain model kits themselves can be a lot of fun to build too. And that's all I have. You've reached the end of this class on terrain models and stand table rehearsals. As always, if you have any questions, make sure you go to your ROTC instructor first. Maybe find an MS4, even a high-speed MS3 that might be able to answer those questions. If you can't get those questions answered, feel free to reach out to me at any time at silver.beatty@mso.umt.edu, and I'll do the best I can to help. Thank you.